But to kick this whole thing off, what we're going to do here at the beginning is kind of in the thought process of, in order to know where you're going, you kind of got to know where you've been. And that kind of gives a frame of reference or a context to. And since many of you are here at DCC, what we know is that over the last year, we've just experienced a tremendous amount of momentum, a tremendous amount of growth, and a lot of things. And what we wanted to do is basically to take a step back and celebrate for a little bit just the things that God has been doing here in us and through us, and frankly through each one of you individually. And so we want to take a step back, because what happens throughout the scriptures, and if you're familiar, especially with the Old Testament, they did this all the time. God would say, I want you to build a monument to remember. I want you to build a monument to remember when God did this or when God did that. In fact, there's one specific that I want to show you. It's in the book of Joshua. If you got your Bible, you can open that up. I don't know how many of you brought your Bible. I thought this was vision. I don't know we're using the Bible. Hey, gotcha. So, Joshua chapter 4, let me give you a little context. I'm not going to teach too long, but come on. Give me a microphone and a Bible. Of course, we're going to teach a little bit. So, Joshua chapter 4, Moses has led the entire nation of Israel out of Egypt around for about 40 years, just wandered in the desert and wandered in the desert and wandered in the desert. Well, Moses is now dead, and Joshua has taken over. And as Joshua takes over, Joshua has to cross this particular river called the Jordan to start to go to battle with folks. And God has called, Joshua to be the leader of the nation of Israel. But as there's any transition in leadership, as maybe you've seen, maybe in your life or in your work or wherever it is that there's a particular point leader, oftentimes there's a question: is this leader good enough? Is this leader as good as the last leader was? Because Moses did some incredible stuff before. And so we don't know if we can trust Joshua, because Joshua's about to call us to put our lives on the line. So God says to Joshua, you're going to come to this river. You're going to come to this Jordan River. And here's how the people are going to know that you're with me. Is when you step foot in the river, the same way it happened with Moses in the Red Sea, I am going to part the waters, and the people are going to pass through on dry land. So at Joshua chapter 4, verse 1, we kind of come in on the tail end of what happened. It says, when all the nation had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, take 12 men from the people, from each tribe a man, and command them, saying, take 12 stones, and from here out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, bring them over with you, and lay them down in a place where you lodge tonight. And then Joshua called 12 men from the people of Israel, whom he had appointed, and a man from each tribe. And Joshua said to him, pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder. Apparently a couple brawny dudes, some Will Collies up in the group. So according to the number of the tribes of people of Israel, that this may be a sign among you when your children ask time to come, what do those stones mean to you? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever. And we're not necessarily going to bring a bunch of stones in here and walk by them every Sunday, but we thought is the same idea. How cool is it? How cool is it just to take a step back, which we rarely do, and celebrate the things that God has done here? Because here let me just kind of tell you the problem with Church World. Church World operates on a week-to-week basis, on a Sunday-to-Sunday basis. So what happens is we see the growth slowly. So a lot of times we don't recognize growth. We don't see all the things that God's doing in a macro perspective. And so it's kind of like if you've got a friend, maybe you for yourself, you've experienced this in skinny people. You're not going to get this illustration, so let me just throw it out there. But for those of us, people who when you were growing up, you shopped in the Husky section. You had a point in your life maybe where you lost a bunch of weight. You lost 10 pounds or 30 pounds or 50 pounds. You lost a bunch of weight. And the people who saw you every day saw you lose weight gradually over a period of time. And so they didn't really notice that much. But then you have a friend that you hadn't seen in 6 months, and you lost 30, 40, 50 pounds. And they see you and they say, oh my gosh, you lost so much weight. The significance of that is that's what happens to us as a church. That we see growth happen from Sunday to Sunday to Sunday to Sunday to Sunday. And here's what's interesting. What is actually miraculous becomes ordinary. What's miraculous, what's the hand of God, what's the favor of God, what is the movement of God through the Holy Spirit in our church, to us, becomes ordinary. Because we see it, and we're so used to more people showing up this Sunday than happened last Sunday. And more people getting baptized this semester than happened last semester. And frankly, this is crazy. We've gotten used to the fact that every time that we give a presentation of the gospel and ask people to raise their hands, at almost every service, multiple people raise their hand. Let me just tell you, that's not normal. That is God working in and through you. Because let me just also be honest about something. I can talk about the Bible, and I can teach the Bible, but very few people ever come to know Jesus without hearing the gospel and seeing the gospel multiple times through their friends. I'm just kind of the icing as much as anything. So here's what we wanted to do. We're going to be a little more interactive than we are right now, because right now you're hush. You know, I get that. So what we're going to do is we got some slides that we're going to show you just to kind of give you a macro perspective. It's a lot of numbers and statistics. So if you're like a numbers statistic person like me, you know, you're going to love this. If you're, if you like to draw, then, we'll have something for you at the end. But what we want to do is kind of give you a picture of saying, okay, we see it week to week. We see the growth week to week. But, if we're working out, these are the gains that we have received over the last year. Anybody with me? All right, good. So we got our first one. I just walked in a circle unintentionally. All right, so first one. This isn't in a number, so this is just a cool thing that happened. Again, this is almost normal to our church, but we launched Project Tallahassee. And that might not be a big deal to you, but that is a big deal because a year ago, there was no thing called Project Tallahassee. That was the Project Backyard way back in the day. We've had some people that took over and took leadership, and so we launched Project Tallahassee because some incredible individuals were willing to do that. So, now, you already got the slide up there, but let me pause and say this. Whenever the new slide comes up, we're just going to have a little fun. We're going to all chat, clap, and cheer, and all that kind of stuff. All right, so will you take that slide down? And wait till I pitch my voice to just the right tone and then show it, and then all of a sudden everybody's going to be like, oh my gosh. All right, so we've seen some incredible things happen through this last year through this thing called Project Tallahassee, and before that it didn't exist. And we have seen dozens and dozens of people interact with their community in incredibly meaningful ways because some people decided to serve because we were able to launch this thing called Project Tallahassee. All right, now this next one's cool. Pause, sound people. This next one's really cool, and let me give you a little backstory to this one. We're going to show you a slide, and it's hard to communicate how significant this is. When we first started, our church, the dream behind the church was to have a church that ministry to the marginalized, ministry to the disadvantaged was not just a particular group of the church, but it was central to the entire church. And so one of the things that we did as soon as we moved to the warehouse, we thought, we're going to launch a vacation Bible school. And so we passed out, flyers in the community, and many of you were part of that team. You knocked on doors, and you didn't know if you were going to get shot or not, but you knocked anyways, and you said the Holy Spirit, And you know what happened? We opened our doors wide. We had programs going, and we had hot dogs cooking, and we had 0 people show up to our first vacation Bible school. But hey, that's all right. We kind of had to take our licks in the beginning. But as time went on, some incredible leaders thought about and dreamed about this idea called a Hope Program. We would bring kids in from the community on a weekly basis and be able to interact with them in meaningful ways that added value to their personal life, but then eventually added impact to their spiritual life. That provided mentoring and tutoring, but also provided discipleship that showed kids love and the love of God, sometimes in very direct ways and sometimes just by being there consistently. And we went to our Hope Program. Well, we saw our VBS go from 0 to our Hope Program at this point last year was 5. Over the last year, it's grown 250%. And I wish I could communicate how big of a deal that is, because here's what that communicates. Our community who didn't trust us before is now beginning to trust us. And not only that, but we're in the hopes and we're in the plans of partnering with 2 different Hope Freedom Schools this summer. We're hoping to launch one here in Tallahassee on the south side, as well as partner to launch one in Gretna in the Gaston County community, to where both of them take 50 kids from around the neighborhoods and bring them in and provide a free after-school educational program for them. So we're just so excited that we're able to start to get some buy-in and some traction with the community. So next up is this one. Then we just love this. We celebrate this all the time. In fact, we're going to have a video about this at the end, or kind of in a few minutes. But every semester we celebrate baptisms. And this semester we celebrated more baptisms than we ever have before. And the reason why we love that is because baptisms resemble life change. It's the goal of the whole thing, that people who didn't know Jesus would come to know Jesus and fully devote their life to him. And so if you got that next slide, you can put it up, that we Yeah, there you go. Now, this next one is incredible, and in fact, I say this is incredible because, truthfully, a couple months ago, we were in a leadership discussion, and we knew that we were going to have an influx in people when the semester came back, and we knew that was going to be a significant thing for us, and we kind of put a plea out there saying, we don't have very many volunteers. We've never been good about engaging volunteers, and we had, some incredible leaders step up and take the place and start to run our volunteer program. As that happened, we just kind of said, hey, if we're going to go to 3 services, we're going to need to get 30 or 40 more volunteers. And that's not from all the people that we have now. That was from, only, a couple hundred or so at that point. And so we said, we just need volunteers. And our volunteerism just exploded as people said, you know what? I believe that God is doing something here, that what's happening here isn't necessarily normal, that I want to be a part of the community or a part of a community that God is really going through. And so with our volunteers, you can go put that next slide up. Man, we went from 30 to 100, I don't know if you can see that last one, 134 volunteers over the last year. That's incredible. And we're going to be making another push, so if you're not volunteer, get off the bench. We need you in the game. So anyways, now this one's cool. This next one's cool. And we love this. We celebrate this all the time. The next one is with our owners. And these are the people who have come and they've said, I want to make DCC my home church. This is the place where I want to invest. This is the place where I want to be invested in. This is the place where I want to look for my community, for discipleship that I want to pour into, that I want to help other people come to know Jesus through this place. And so we've had a tremendous swing in our owners. And if you can go ahead and put that next one up. Now we went from 0, which we didn't have them before, to 105 people. And that's just phenomenal. We're super excited about that. Now, also kind of as a reference point with our owners, let me just kind of tell you how cool that is. Last August, so not, a couple months ago, but, a year and a couple months ago, we had like a third of that in our parking lot services. So for us to have 105 people who aren't just attenders, who's not just those are the people connecting in community groups. These are the people who have said, this is my place. To have 105 is just absolutely phenomenal for us. The next one, and this has been crazy. This is the obvious one that everyone sees, but this is the one that it kind of takes some frame of reference to really get a grasp of how big of a deal this is. The next one that we're talking about is how many people show up on a Sunday. When we first started the church, let me tell you our first church gathering. I called 3 of my best friends, 3 or 4, and I think it was 3 because the other 4th was getting a little shady. So I called 3 of my best friends. It's a true story. I called 3 of my best friends and I said, fellas, I want you guys to come over. I want you to pray. William was one of them at the time. I said, I want you to come over and I want you to pray about joining this thing. We talk about this all the time at the owner meeting. I want you to come over. I want you to pray. And you don't have to pray about being a part. I just want you to pray for me. And then I want you to thinking about if you would want to be a part of this. And I want you to come over, 8:30 tomorrow morning or 8:30 a couple mornings from now. I'm going to cook breakfast, do all this stuff. So I got up, made pancakes, made, eggs and bacon and sausage, which was obviously free for me, and got a bunch of orange juice and did this whole thing. And I said, come on, fellas, come over. And 8:30 comes, and nobody's coming. I'm like, all right, that's all right. We're always the late crowd. It's not a big deal. 8:45 came, and I'm like, okay, where are the fellas? 9 o'clock came. Let me just tell you. To our first gathering, it was a gathering of 1, which was Ben. So really, it was a gathering of 0 if you don't count the people in charge. So let me just tell you. I joke about this all the time. I always expect and I tell William this, I always expect our church to grow. I just don't ever expect people to show up next Sunday. It's the weirdest dichotomy mentally that happens in my mind. But I think we're going to grow. But every Sunday I'm like, I don't think they're showing up this Sunday. But I want to show you how much, this is so significant. I want to show you how many people we've grown by over the last year. Our 170 was about our top service in the fall of last year. So I'm talking about the biggest one where everybody showed up and they brought the grandma to this thing in service. We had about 170 people. We averaged 360 people this last semester. Now, let me just say this too. This past Sunday, we had almost 500 people come in and go to church here at DCC. It was unbelievable. And I don't think they're showing up next week, but I think we're going to grow, Now, let me just be honest. we think, and we're honestly, we're going through all kinds of different things that we can find ways, because our current, we're going to talk about where we're going, our current space is limited, and so we're inventing ways and thinking of new ways that we can create more space, because let me just tell you, you guys have done such a phenomenal job of investing in your friends and inviting them to church. You've done such a great job of investing in people around you, investing in your roommates, investing in your classmates, investing in the people that you work with, investing in your family, and say, hey, why don't you come with me to church? I think you'd like it. And because of that, our growth has just been exponential over the last year. And so we're so excited about that. Now, this next one is another one that's huge to the heart of who we are as a church. We just think discipleship. We would never want to be a church that's just so wide, brings in tons of people, but doesn't get anybody connected into actual groups and into actual, we believe, discipleship happens, where meaningful interaction happens, where people gather around and discuss the scriptures, pray for one another, hold each other accountable, do all the things that happen in discipleship relationships. And so with our groups, we've had a tremendous amount of growth with our groups. You can put that up. Our groups have grown 300% over what they were. We have over 100 people. In fact, I couldn't tell you the exact number right now, but I mean, it's just been a tremendous amount of growth with our group program. So you're supposed to clap when that happened. You missed that one. Now, let me tell you this last one. Now, this one is a little bit crazy for me personally, because this is the one where I look at and I think, good grief. You know, we had a bunch of people who had shown up to our church before last year, but this past year we started doing this thing called a new people card, and we give them out a handy-dandy t-shirt. And so we had, whenever someone would come new, who, many of you, maybe you were new when you walked in the door for the first time, and you filled out a new person card, and you're here now. You brought a friend who, walked in the door for the first time, and they filled out a new person card. Now, we know there's tons of people who haven't filled out cards. But let me show you the amount of people in the last year who have walked in the door to DCC for the first time. That's pretty unbelievable, isn't it? Now, let me tell you why that matters. Let me tell you why that 636 matters. Because each one of those things, each one of those numbers, each individual number in that represents a person. And each person represents someone who Jesus died for. And that's an opportunity that we have every single week to reach. That's a person that every single week we have an opportunity to add value to perhaps their existing spiritual life, to deepen the depth of their spiritual life. Because here's what we never want to get away from. And all this numbers and all the percentages and all the growth is it's individuals. It's individuals. It's your friend. I mean, we could have 600, we could have 1,000 new people that walk in the door for the first time in the church. But let me just tell you, this is for me the game changer when it's my friend who walks in the door for the first time. In fact, about 3 weeks ago, the week before Christmas, I was at our small group, our community group, had a little dinner where a few of us showed up to Midtown Caboose, and as we were all eating, I saw a couple of my buddies from high school, and a couple of my friends have already started coming that were from high school that come to church here now. And as I was sitting down, I sat down next to one of them. We started talking. He said, "Man, I've never been to your church, and I want to go this Sunday." Let me just tell you, I felt what you felt all the time. Which is like, I hope we don't sing too much, and I hope I don't suck. You know what I mean? I mean, seriously, that's what you think. You're like, okay, Ben better not be awful, and William better be wonderful. You know what I mean? Like just, and you're nervous, and you're bringing them, and so I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, now it's on me. I better not be awful, and so I'm rethinking my sermon. I'm like, do I need to re-outline? And here's what's incredible. Is we have seen so many people give their life to Christ. We have seen so many individuals decide as a person who you brought and who you invested in and who you cared about give their life to Jesus. And so we want to show you as we kind of transition to it into a little bit more, a few more songs, because we think that this is a cause for celebration, that God has in fact done something and God is in fact doing something in our midst. And so we're going to celebrate in a little bit. Before we celebrate, we want to show you one of the stories behind one of the individuals who showed up to DCC one day. Well, that was not incredible. So I want to spend the last few minutes that we have together talking a little bit about where we're going as a church, where we feel like God's called us to in the next year. And really the vision and where we're headed, it's not different than it was before. It's just on another, I guess, level than it was before. When we first started, let me just tell you about our mission and our vision. When we first started as a church, the reason that we felt called and compelled to start a church is we kind of felt like there was three main components. I'm kind of a simplistic type person. I love to break things down and say, okay, I need to understand things simply, I guess, for me to understand them. But there seems like there's three components that a church, when the body of Christ did as they were reflective of who Jesus was. Because that's kind of what, essentially that's what a church is. A church is the physical representation of Jesus here on earth today, as we are all differently skilled and differently gifted, that we all have different purposes, that when the body comes together, we make what should be and what ought to be a picture of Jesus. And there's some things specifically that Jesus did that we felt, he just did tons of stuff. But as we look through the scriptures, as we break down the scriptures of the things that Jesus did, there were three things that he just did, and it seemed like were the core of who he was. And one guy, two of them are summed up in one sentence that he said when a guy came to him and said, Jesus, what's the most important commandment? And Jesus basically said the most important commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second one is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. And when we looked across kind of the landscape of what God was calling us to do, it was this idea of a church that was incredibly well balanced and did both of those at the same time. And on the other end of that, it was the command that Jesus gave to his disciples when he said, okay, I'm leaving, I'm out. Matthew chapter 28, he says, this is what I want you to do with everything that I've taught you, with all the things that you've experienced, all the life lessons and the spiritual lessons and the ways that you've seen me walk. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations. And so we kind of stood back as a church and said, what are the three things that we just absolutely cannot miss on? And those are the three things that we would do a great job at loving God. We would do a great job at making disciples. We would do a great job, as we say it, being great neighbors. Because one day Jesus, some guy asked a question that was, trying to trick Jesus and said, okay, so this whole be great, love your neighbor thing. Who's my neighbor? And Jesus answered that not with, this is who your neighbor is. He answered with how to be a great neighbor. And so God was always more concerned with you being a neighbor and me being a neighbor than necessarily defining exactly who our neighbors are. And so what we thought as a church is, how incredible would it be as a church? As a church who did all three of those things really well. Because there's a lot of churches who do two of those three very well. There's tons of churches who do one of those three things very well. But how fantastic would it be if a church got all three of those right? Because there's a lot of churches who are great at helping people and introducing people into a relationship with God. There's a lot of churches who you just bring in people and bring in people and bring in people and bring in people. You're great at that point. And then there's other churches who are really good at discipleship. And they're just have incredible depth as a church. And there's other churches that we felt like, there's other bodies of believers who rally around this idea of others focusedness, who rally around this idea of selflessness, this idea of, as we kind of phrase it in our current cultural context, is missions. Missions, helping the poor and the marginalized and the communities around us, perhaps the communities internationally that are disenfranchised and just destitute for whatever reason. And there's churches that do two of those things. We thought, man, how fantastic, how incredible, how dynamic, how vivid of a picture of the person of Jesus Christ would it be for a church that did all three of those things incredibly well. That they reached people with the gospel. They saw people come to know Jesus, people for the first time in their life, or perhaps for the first time in their adult life, come to fully place their faith, their hope, and their trust in Jesus. And at the same time, didn't just leave it there, but grew incredible depth or facilitated depth and growth in their personal life, in their relationship with God. And that there was just this depth and this level of maturity that for all the churches that are really wide, this was one that was not just wide, but that it was deep. In fact, the image of this that we gave, this was so long ago that we talked about this. We talked about this Lake Tahoe illustration. That Lake Tahoe is a gigantic lake, and if you've ever been to Lake Tahoe, from time to time there's plaques around Lake Tahoe where they say not only is this a huge lake, but the depth of Lake Tahoe is so deep that if it were to spring a leak and spread across the state of California, it would cover California in a couple feet of water, because it's not just wide, but it's deep. And we thought, man, what if God could create in us a Lake Tahoe of churches? That it's not just about being big, and it's not just about being big for the sake of being big, but it's about growing for the sake that we want to reach people. And then once we reach them, we don't want to just leave them there. but we want to add value. We want to depthen their relationship with God. And then the culmination of those things is to look at what Jesus looked at and interact with the people who Jesus interacted with, which were the people that none of the religious people would, which were often the poor, which were often the marginalized, which were often the disenfranchised. And he would interact in meaningful ways. That the culmination of the gospel wasn't just to continue to act like and hang out with and spend time with people who looked and acted and dressed like me, but with anybody and everybody. And so as we go kind of into the next year of who we feel like God's called us to be, there's a lot of ways that works itself out nuts and bolts for us. There's some things that we want you to be praying for us about this. First and foremost, we want you to be praying. One of the directions that we feel called as the next step for us as a church is with young families. We feel like there's tons and tons of young families around here who have maybe graduated within the last 5 to 10 years, but who haven't, just kind of wandered around on the church market, on the church circuit, that we would love to reach for the gospel, especially young families, people. And if you've never had kids, which most of you haven't, but you'll find this out when you do. You have friends that won't go to church, but will go to church when they have kids. That guy that I was telling you about, he doesn't have kids yet, but his friends have kids. Some of you, you've been praying for your friend or your roommate, your buddy for a year now to come to know Jesus. Legitimately have been hoping this guy comes to church for 17 years, and he shows up. And that's what we love to see. And that's what we love to hear. And we think when people hit that stage of life where they start to have kids, they're at a point where they don't know if they're interested or not, but they know that they want their kids there. And we think that is in a critical crossroads in their life. And so we want you to pray for us as we kind of try to look at some new ways, develop some new ways and create some new ways that we can reach some young families. And part of that thing that we're looking for is space. Because every Sunday we gather and we're reminded we can't grow much more because there's only so many people you can fit in this little square. And let me just tell you, there's only so many families who are going to be crazy enough to leave their little kids in a little, 4x4 room with some other volunteers, and say, we love you, Susie, Hope you're here when we come back. Well, we don't know. There's bars on the windows. I don't know if y'all saw that or not, Should we? Oh, my kid's yelling, I'm out. It's funny. You should sit in the back one Sunday if you haven't ever before. As soon as one kid screams, 4 moms get up and dip. That's just, it is what it is. No, but here's the reality. We're hoping and we're praying, and honestly right now, just be transparent. We're aggressively pursuing some new places that are similar to the feel of this place to have church so that we can continue to facilitate growth, especially within the context of young families. Because we know there's only so many people that are going to come back to our church if our kids' ministry area only has so much room, and if our sanctuary space only has so much room. We're getting close to capped. In fact, I have a meeting with the city next Wednesday that I'd love for you. If you get up Wednesday morning, you're thinking about it, we'd love for you to pray as we meet with some of the city people and the fire and the mechanical and the electrical and all this kind of stuff that you got to go through to jump hoops to create one of these environments. And so we'd love for you to pray for us as we're going through that. We'd love for you to pray over this next semester and over this next year for our community outreach. Man, we feel like God is calling something big in both our Hope program and Project Tallahassee. We think that those are 2 phenomenal programs, and we've really started to gain some traction with our leadership and with the people. And more than that, we've really started to get some community buy-in that wasn't there before. You should have been at our Christmas Eve service. We had parents who came, whose kids sang on the stage, who had never come to church here before. We had, and I say this more so to brag on them, but Keely, who runs the Hope program, Keely and Brian, had one of the parents ask them to be the godparents of their kid. That's phenomenal. That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. Because they showed up, and because they loved, and because they served. Now that's not like, oh my gosh, DCC, but I mean, hello. That's huge. As an individual person decides that they are going to become active in the life of what God's called them to do. And so we're hoping and we're praying that more people decide to give up a Saturday morning. That we're hoping that more people decide to give up a Wednesday afternoon. We're hoping as that happens, our light just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. And people see Jesus through us as we gather. And we hope that as people come on a Sunday, we hope that we can do everything that we can to push and push and push and push towards groups. Because as great as a guy standing on a stage with a microphone is, what's so much more transformative is as people, as individuals, sit in a group together, in small groups together. Some of your groups are a little bit bigger than small groups. And open up the scriptures and talk about the verses. Air out some frustration, some misunderstanding, some confusion, some encouragement, some enlightenment. And then gather at the end and share life together and do prayer requests and talk about what's happening in life. Man, let me just tell you, I sat in our nursery on Monday with me and two other guys. The night of the national championship game, obviously not many dudes are going to show up. Two other guys. And we just had a phenomenal conversation as we talked about what God's doing and what's happening in life. And we just think that that is the target that just drives spiritual growth. That is the catalytic point in our church. So we would love for you to pray for us, for yourselves, for your friends, for the people who share the row to you, next to you, and for the people who share the row next to you, not just here but in your class, that they would come to know Jesus and that their relationship would be deepened. Now, I want to spend this last little bit, and we're going to talk about something new. We're going to be in 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 is a bit of an odd part to go to be honest, because Paul's talking a lot about married people, which you guys don't fall into the category of, too many of you. But in 1 Corinthians 7, Paul's talking, just giving all kinds of advice for people who are married, for people who aren't married, for people who are married to people who aren't believers, and just back and forth, and what you ought to do, what you ought to not do, and all this kind of stuff. And Paul kind of, in chapter 7, starting at verse 29, gets to this point where essentially he just says, okay, let me just kind of communicate the principle behind why. I'm saying a lot of stuff of married people, how you ought to act, and unmarried people, how you ought to act, and people married to non-believers, how you ought to act. And let me just give you a little window, a little snapshot into how my mind as Paul works. And this is what he says. He says, this is what I mean, brothers. The appointed time has grown very short. Now, when Paul says that, here's what he means by that. It basically means that your time is allotted. You have an appointed time. There's an appointed time for me. There's an appointed time for you. There's an appointed time for all of us. That we only have, it's almost like God saying, or Paul saying, hey, your time is contracted. It's written down. You're going to last this long. And the younger you are, let me just tell you, you think, I'm going to live forever. And at 32, I'm like, man, I'm getting old. Like, I worked out yesterday. My back is killing me right now. That didn't happen when I was 22. But the older you get, the more you realize, hey, I don't have that much longer. I mean, I've got some more time. I'm not like, this isn't like, pray for me, I'm about to die or anything like that. But I'm just saying, like I realize, hey, I only have so much time here on planet Earth. And that it's very short. And the older I get, to realize how short it really is. And so he says this. He says, so from now on, let those of you who have wives live as though they had none. Now that's an interesting context. Tweet that one. And those who mourn as though they were not mourning, and those who rejoice as though they were not rejoicing, and those who buy as though they had no goods, and those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. Now, this is huge, because Paul's about to say, hey, our time is short, our time is short, our time is short. We only have so much time, it's contracted. There's only a little bit of time that you have here on planet Earth, and for many of you, especially those of you who are students, there's only so much time that you have here while you're in Tallahassee, because you're about to go and you're about to do something cool with some other place, and Tallahassee's weird, so you're going to go to, Atlanta or Oregon. Nobody goes to Oregon. You're going to go to, Nashville. Hello, half of the, I'm going to go to Chattanooga because I'm a hippie, and so I'm going to go look at bridges and mountains and birds, so you're going to go where now. You're going to be here for such a short time. Before you know it, it's going to be over. And you're 20 years old, and before you know it, I'm just telling you, before you know it, you're going to look up. I want you to remember this. When you turn 30, you're going to realize, I thought I had a lot more time before I hit 30. I want you to think of me when you hit 30, by the way. And remember Ben said, I told you so. And you're going to think back and say, dang it, he told me so. That's how that conversation is going to go in your mind. And here's what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to realize your time is so short. So he ends this in verse 31. For the present world, for the present form of this world is passing. away. So let me just tell you the bottom line of this. The present form of this world, how this world is now, where you are in this world, it's passing away. And you only have so much time. Now, I got an illustration that some of you might have seen before, but let me just tell you, this just so perfectly describes how we act and interact. Essentially what God's saying is this. He's saying, this is your life. It's contracted. About right here is where you turn 16 or so. And from about this little part to this little part is when you're in college. And then you're going to have a kid, and that little part to that little part is going to feel like about that much. And then you're going to be retired, and then you die. So congratulations, that's your life right here. But then, after you die, there's all of this. There's eternity. There's eternity to live forever and ever and ever. There's your friend's eternity. There's my eternity. There's your eternity. There's all of eternity that we're all going to spend somewhere. And so what Paul is saying is, hey, let me just kind of give you a snapshot. You only have so much of this. You only have so much of this. So why would you have this and not live for this? Why would you spend all of your time thinking, okay, honestly, here's how most of us think. I'm going to spend here to here getting my education, so from here to here I can make money, so for this little bit, I can retire. That's what most of our lives revolve around. That is the American dream. That I'm going to spend this to this, getting my education, so this to this, I can make money, so this to this, I can retire. Now, if you're a doctor, you're going to be from here to here getting your education, from here to here working, and from here to here, you retire, but your retirement is going to be pretty cool. We're just going to say that. If you're a social worker, you're going to be like here to here education, and you might retire about right here. We'll see or not. If you're a teacher, then hey, we're just going to pray for you this whole time. But you're influencing you, so we love you. Now, here's what's crazy. Here's what's crazy. For most of us, when we look at this, we will spend most of our life thinking about this and not thinking about that. And what God has called us to do, what Paul is saying here is, hey, I'm not going to spend this little time. I'm not going to spend this little time living for this little bit of time. I'm going to spend this little bit of time living for all of this. And so those of you who are married, man, I don't want you to get in fights about random stuff, about ridiculous stuff, because you're going to be so focused on what happens right here, you're going to forget that you have all of this to live for, that you have an opportunity to make an eternal impact on so many people's lives. Let me just tell you, and you can spend all of your education worrying about this little part so you can get to this little part, so you can get to this little part, and then you die. And we perpetuate this idea of living for today, And for some of us, it's let's plan and live for tomorrow. But very few of us say, hey, let me live for today for eternity. Now, the future of our church is not an organizational movement. The future of our church is a group of people who understand that this is passing away. But this is going to last forever. And it's just going to continue and continue and continue. And this is the time that God has allotted and given us. And for some of you, this little bit is the time that you have here in Tallahassee. So don't waste it. Don't waste it. Don't waste it. Use your time here. Use your time here. Leverage your influence here. Leverage your friendships here. Leverage your God-given talents and abilities here to make a difference here. Because the vision of DCC, the vision of where we're going in 2016, is a group of people who says, okay, simplistically how that works out is I better do a great job of first and foremost loving God and having a relationship with Him. I better do a great job at being a great neighbor to the people around me. And I really, 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 really want to help and invest and make disciples. That I want to help people come to know Jesus, and I want to help people who know Jesus further their walk. You see, a lot of us, where we, everybody's a different hiccup in that point. But for most of us, we fall short in one of those places. You disciple really well, And you have tons of people, and people could call you the coffee shop king because you don't ever stop meeting with people in coffee shops. You don't know a dang person that doesn't know Jesus, but you know some coffee shops. For some of us, you know tons of people who aren't Christians, but you're not discipling a darn person. You're just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and hoping somebody pours into you and pours into you. Let me just end that by saying, if everyone waits for someone else to pour into them, no one will ever get poured into. Some of us, we haven't decided to interact in any kind of meaningful way in the community. Let me just press this again. This world, in its present form, is passing away. Now, let me end with this cool story. Or this initiative and a cool story. For the rest of the semester, we decided to do this one simple thing. And it's called the 731 campaign. The 731 campaign. And what the 731 campaign is, we're saying, okay, so all these thoughts, all these ideas. So what's the nuts and bolts? What's the take home? How do I take this vision night? And again, we talk about the individual. So how do I as an individual live this out? So here's what we want you to do. It's a 731 campaign. You'll see on the front, on the back it says 731. Very, difficult to comprehend that. Here's what you want you to do. We want you to pray 7 days a week. Crazy. We want you to pray 7 days a week for our church, our leadership, our community, and our city. You can pray for all those every single day. You can rotate them. We don't care how you do it. We just want you to commit to saying, I want to pray 7 days a week for my church, for my community, for my leaders, for my city. Let me just tell you, we need your prayers. I, as your pastor, need your prayers. We, as a leadership, need your prayers. Our entire church community needs your prayers. Our entire city needs your prayers. We all need your prayers. And so we want you to commit to, for the rest of the semester, praying every single day, 7 days a week, for our city, our church, our community, and our leaders. The next thing is this, the 3-part. We want you to pray for 3 friends that you are going to intentionally pour into who don't know Jesus. We want you to pray for 3 friends. And in fact, here's what I want you to do. You don't have to do this now. We're going to give you some time to pray about this as we close this out. I want at some point tonight or tomorrow or as soon as you think about those 3 people, I want you to write their names on this card. I want you to write all 3 of the people who you're going to spend this semester intentionally investing in who don't know Jesus. Now, that doesn't mean, let me just pause. That doesn't mean your goal for the semester is to bring them to church. The way we feel about our Sunday gatherings is that's a tool. That's a tool for the disciples of God to use to help other people come to know Jesus. Because every Sunday, I hope that as we open up the scriptures together, they see the gospel and that your existing relationship with God is deepened. We try to manage and balance that tension between people who show up who are unbelievers and people who show up who are believers. And that's simply a tool. So if you want to use us, if you want to use our Sunday gatherings as a tool, absolutely. But we want you to minister. We want you to love on. We want you to invest in. We want you to spend time with. We want you to pray for 3 people intentionally. And the last one is this one. We want you to pray for one area of influence. One area of influence to get involved. We want you to pray for one area of influence that you can get involved in. Maybe for you, that's our, that's something through our church. Perhaps for you, it's you need to get involved in the kids ministry. In fact, if we're going to continue to grow with our kids, we're going to need more kids workers. So if you're interested in that, let me just tell you now, we need more kids people. Beyond that, maybe it's part of our Sunday hospitality team. Let me just tell you the story that I love to hear over and over and over and over again. I love to hear when people come that people come to DCC and I said, well, what'd you like about it? What brought you back? Most times, let me just be honest, it's not the music was unbelievable. Oh my gosh, the teaching, you just spoke. And I'm like, that's the voice of God. He's not a human. Doesn't happen. They say, I walked in and I felt like I was at home. I walked in, that's many of your story. You walked in, and there was somebody who was standing outside in the parking lot, and you had that awkward distance as you were walking up, and they were standing there. When do you say hi? When do you not say hi? You kind of give them one of these weird things, but for some reason, they walked up. And you said hi, and they said hi, and you had a conversation. It was a genuine conversation. It wasn't an inauthentic conversation. And they genuinely made you feel welcome, regardless of who you are, regardless of what you've done, regardless of where you've ever been. That you were welcome here. Maybe that's you get involved in Project Tallahassee. That you intentionally invest in. That you start by showing up once a month to a Project Tallahassee site. And then get involved with one of the phenomenal nonprofits that we partner with. We don't have an idea that we need to reinvent the wheel in every area of our city. We love to partner with people who are already knocking it out of the park. And just say, can we fuel you with people who would love to serve the people groups that your organization is already serving? Maybe for you it's the Hope Program. I mean, there's 1,000 different ways, and there's a ton of ways outside of just the things that we do. But we just want you to pray 7 days a week. For our church, for our community, for our leaders, for our city. We want you to pray when you pray for those 3 people of influence, and we want you to invest in those 3 people. And then we want you to pray about one specific place that you can get involved. And by doing that, you are loving God, you are making disciples, and you are being a great neighbor to the people around you. Now, here's the story that I was thinking about, like, okay, that's going to be cool, that's going to be neat, that's going to be cool, it's going to be neat. So as we're looking at the 731 campaign, now this might sound dumb of me, and I get that. As we were praying about this and I was thinking about this, I was thinking, man, how cool would it be to attach this to a verse? You know, I mean, we need a verse to go behind this whole thing. And so as I was thinking about it and praying about it and thinking about it and praying about it and thinking about it and praying about it, I started going through like Matthew 7:31. Okay, there's not a Matthew 7:31. Mark 7:30. Okay, I guess it's about 28. Started going through all the chapters, and I spent about 10 minutes as I'm a little bit ADD-ish, and I'm like, okay, well, there's not any in the Bible that work, so we're just going to give up. So legit, did that on Sunday or on Monday morning. Woke up, my wife and I woke up, spending a little bit of time reading, and I'm reading, I open up to 1 Corinthians chapter 7. I'm reading 1 Corinthians chapter 7, not thinking anything about what's happening tonight. And just, read the Bible. I thought, oh man, that's the verse I want to teach on. That is the verse I want to teach on. And as I'm, texting with Will, this happened yesterday. I was texting with Will, and about to leave the plant, sending him some text, and I'm looking over the verses that he, that I'm going to talk on, and he's texting back about this. So on the drive home, obviously I was at a stoplight at this point. On the drive home, I Google, just like, I'm thinking, okay, there's no way I'm going to type in a book into this. So I'm just typing 7.31. I'm just typing 7.31. And I click on it. And the first verse that comes up is 1 Corinthians 7:31, which says, this world in its present form is passing away. And I'm simultaneously thinking, God, that's genius, and Ben, you're an idiot for not realizing that. I'm like, okay, first off, I don't know which one to be more excited or depressed about. I'm so stoked because that's unbelievable. God, I wouldn't have thought about that. One second, I'm like, Ben, how did you not think about that? Come on, those are the verses that you're teaching on. And I love the fact that God had these verses in mind to say, hey, your time is contracted, your time is short, how you live matters, because this world in its present form is passing away. At the same time, in Will's mind, he's saying 731 campaign, 731 campaign, 731 campaign. At the same time, I'm thinking, passing away. And on I-10 home from Cottondale, God just says, hey, reject, here's both of these at the same time. You thought I was going to a different place with that R word. No, people. He said, here's both. And here's what I want you to know. That your world, in its present form, is passing away. That your time is very contracted. And your time is very short. So leverage your time here like this world is passing away. So leverage your time here by spending time in prayer. Leverage your time here by investing in people who don't know Jesus. And leverage your time here by investing in the community around you. And when you do that, you will be the light of the world. And people will see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. And God willing, we'll stand here at the beginning of 2017 and say, oh my gosh, can you believe what God did? Because at the end of the day, our goal is never to do something that we can do, but to see something happen, some movement of God happen, that we all step back and say, there's no way that we could have done that. because I'm not smart enough, and we're not talented enough, and we still have concrete floors. But God did something. So here's what I want you to do. Band's going to come back up here. I'm going to pray for us. And I just want you to spend some time. They're going to play a couple more songs. I think they're playing a couple more songs. Play 2 songs at least, guys. I want you to spend the first song. And here's what I want you to do. I just want you to spend some time in prayer. I just want you to spend some time in prayer. What does this mean for you? I want you to spend some time praying and saying, God, am I really going to commit to praying 7 days a week? We don't need any 4 days a weekers. I know it was a good try. We need some 7-day-a-weekers in our community. We need people who are really going to write down the 3 people, God. I mean, God, there's tons of people I know who don't know you, or God, I don't know anybody. So please just introduce me to 3 people. We need you to write down 3 people that you are going to pour into. Use us if you want to. Don't use us if you don't want to. And we need you to pray for one place of influence that you're going to get involved. And so I just want you to spend some time in prayer for what specifically all of this means